So this morning we're beginning a brand new sermon series called What Kind of Character Are You? And we're not asking you, what Simpsons character you compare yourselves to or who your favorite Looney Tunes character is, but what are the things that you think make up a person of good character? What are the qualities that you look for? And what are the qualities that you strive to be as a person in faith? But before I do that, I've got something that I need to say, and I've been debating whether or not to bring this up while Brian was gone on his 10 weeks, and every week I thought I would, but then I kind of pulled back. Well, last week I was on vacation, and I thought, okay, I've got to do it. This is my last week, because Pastor Brian's up at beach camp, and this is my last chance to say this to you. So I just want to talk about worship just for a second. Because, guys, I got to be real honest with you. Worship sometimes feels mechanical to me. I don't know if it feels that way to you, but sometimes worship feels like we do the same thing over and over and over again, and sometimes I feel like I'm getting into a rut. I get that there's comfort for us as we know what to do and things are familiar, and it brings up, warm and fuzzies to do the same thing, but for me sometimes I feel like I'm the executive producer of a show. And I have to make sure that I have all the right lines memorized, and I write the most beautiful prayers, and that I stay away from certain words like narthex and fireside room because nobody knows what those are, and those are old school words, and we've got to be new and hip, and we have to say seats, and we have to say that room where you get coffee, and all of those things. I just feel like sometimes there are Sundays where I struggle to get into the groove. I struggle to get into the feeling of worship. There are times that I stand up here when I'm leading worship or I'm preaching, I forget I'm in worship. And I feel like I'm just leading the service. I struggle with that. I struggle with connecting with God, and that this is a Sunday morning, and first and foremost, I am here to worship. But I've got to tell you, there are times where I'm just not feeling it. So welcome to our new sermon series for the month of August. What kind of character are you? Today's message is entitled Honesty at All Costs. So I thought I would just be honest about some of the ways that I struggle here when I lead worship. So what do we think? Honesty at all costs. Are you sure? Are you sure that's something that you want? Of course, honesty is the best policy. We all know that. We've all heard that. We all believe that. But there is a difference between talking about honesty and actually living that honesty out. Those are two very different things. As I was thinking about this message and where to go, I wanted to obviously go back to the Bible, and I was thinking, who can we talk about? What great character in the Bible can we talk about who struggled with honesty? Not only honesty with those around them, but honesty around themselves, honesty with themselves as well. And so I just came to the famous story of David and Bathsheba. Many of you in this room probably know that story very well. David, this great king, this wonderful king that was anointed by God, who stood in front of the giant as a young boy and took his slingshot and hit him right in the center of the forehead and killed him. That king, fast forward years and years and years later, there's David, and he's looking about his kingdom, and he's walking about in the middle of the night, and out of the corner of his eye, he spots this beautiful woman bathing on the roof, and he goes, hey, I like what I see. And I'm the king. I'm the king of this place. And so with king comes certain benefits, right? I mean, whatever I want, I can have whatever meal I want, whatever entertainment I want. And so because I am the king of everything, and I've done some pretty good things for God, right? I mean, David was probably thinking, I probably still have some good street cred from when I killed the giant. So he says, that's what I want, that's what I'm going to have, that's what I'm going to take, because that was the time, and that was the culture during that time. The king wanted that woman bathing on the roof, and that's what he did. But imagine for a moment, had David decided, when he saw Bathsheba bathing on the roof, and he had this temptation to go, I want that woman there. Imagine if he just stopped for a second and pumped the brakes just a little bit to go, wait a minute. Let me think about what some of the things that God has to say about that. Let me think about what Moses has to say in the law about coveting, about taking things that aren't yours, and all of that other stuff. His story might have turned out just a little bit different. Imagine if one of his close confidants had come to him after hearing what David wanted to do and said, hey, David, maybe not. Maybe don't do that. Or imagine if David had asked one of his close confidants, this is what I'm struggling with. Will you help me? Will you get me through this? Will you hold me accountable for that? But none of that happened because David was a king. And kings aren't supposed to struggle with anything because kings can have whatever they want. And that was the attitude that David took into this. So upon seeing Bathsheba, he just said, yep, that's what I want. I want that beautiful woman on the roof. And then she becomes pregnant. Whoops. And so what does David do upon realizing what had happened and what he'd done? Does he go back and say, okay, I've totally messed up. I need to go after Bathsheba's husband. I need to beg him for forgiveness and confess to him what I've done so that he'll forgive me and everything will be okay? Of course he doesn't do that. I don't know about you, but sometimes when I realize that I'm wrong, the last thing that I want to do is admit it. I just want to keep going and figuring out how I can turn away from what actually I had done. I do that from time to time. That's what David did. David comes up with a great plan in his head. He thought, boy, this plan is solid. This is where I'm going to go with this plan. I'm going to invite Bathsheba's husband to come back from war. And when he comes back, he's going to go see his wife. And then when he goes and sees his wife, he's going to think that the reason that she's pregnant is because of him and not because of the great King David. Are we tracking? I realize I'm talking fast. But that was his great plan, right? And so he brings Bathsheba's husband Uriah back and he says, welcome back, go hang out with your wife. And Uriah doesn't do that. He decides not to go home, and they come to him and they say, why in the world would you not want to go see your wife? He goes, it's not right. All of my brothers are off at war and they're fighting and they don't get to see their wives and they don't get to be with their families, so I'm not going to do that either. It's a man of high integrity, right? And so David is shocked and he thinks, well, I guess all Uriah really needs is a little bit of liquid courage, so he throws a party for him. Uriah has a little bit too much to drink and he figures that then, once he's got a little bit of courage in him, once he's just a little bit sauced, he's going to go home to his wife and my plan is going to work out perfectly, but again, it doesn't work out. Imagine, David keeps digging himself deeper and deeper and deeper. If only he had stopped and said, wait a minute, maybe God's trying to tell me something. Maybe this isn't the plan, maybe this isn't the route that I need to be going down. But he doesn't do that. Uriah doesn't go back, and Uriah does not go back after being drunk and hang out with his wife and all of that stuff. He doesn't do that again. And so David has one more plan, and this one's foolproof. He's going to send Uriah back to battle, and he's going to have him ambushed. So that when he goes into war, everybody else is going to pull back, and Uriah will be there, and he will be killed. And therefore, he doesn't have to worry about a husband, because then Bathsheba will be a widow, and then David can marry her, and all will be well, all according to God's plan. Right? Not really, but that's what he does anyway. That was the plan. That was David's grand plan about how he was going to get away with what it was that he was scheming. He just keeps digging himself deeper and deeper and deeper. If only somebody in that moment had stopped and said, wait a minute, what are you doing? Or if only David had stopped and go, wait a minute, God, I need help with this. Things keep getting worse and worse and worse. Until finally, God uses the prophet Nathan to talk to David. And to give David a little bit of insight about what's going on in his kingdom. So Nathan comes to David and says, King, you'll never guess what's happening. You have two men in your kingdom. One of them is rich and one of them is poor. And this rich guy, let me tell you about him, he can have whatever he wants. He's got all sorts of livestock and possessions, and he does not want for absolutely anything. And then there's this poor guy over here in your kingdom, and he has absolutely nothing, but the one thing he cherishes is this little ewe lamb. He loves it like a child. He cherishes this lamb. You'll never guess what the rich guy did. The rich guy had a traveler come through town, and the traveler wanted to eat dinner, so he threw him a huge banquet. But the rich guy didn't want to use any of his livestock. So he went to the poor man's house and he stole the lamb and he slaughtered it and he fed it to this traveler. And David is absolutely outraged, and the king kind of puffs himself up and says, I will not stand for this. The person who took that lamb must be put to death, and the person whose lamb was taken from him needs to be given back fourfold. Everything needs to be given back to him. And Nathan goes, yeah, boss, you're that man. You're the one that did all of it. Imagine being David for that moment. You've puffed yourself up. You've tried to be the big moral. You've tried to be the great judge. You've tried to be an example of absolute morality and being a good person and fighting on behalf of those who can't fight for themselves. And then Nathan comes to you and holds up a mirror in front of your face and goes, guess what? That's you, king. Imagine being David. Have you ever been in that position where somebody's come to you and called you out and you just kind of want to hide in the corner and go, wait a minute, that wasn't me. If only somebody had stopped David and pulled him aside. If only David had taken a moment to realize what big of a hole he was digging himself into. God taught David one of the hardest lessons that we have to learn, and we have to learn it over and over and over again, and that is, honesty is a good thing, but it isn't always a pain-free thing. Sometimes honesty hurts. Sometimes looking in the mirror is not a pleasant thing. Sometimes we look back and we don't like what we see, or we don't like what we've done. The story of David and Bathsheba, yeah, it's a story about lust. And it's a story about coveting a wife's neighbor and then taking a wife's neighbor and then bearing false witness over and over and over again. And it's a story about murder. But all of those things listed above and what this story is about are the result of one thing: David's lack of honesty with himself and with those around him. David telling himself that he can have whatever and whoever he wants because he is king. David telling himself that he's entitled to those things because he's on God's side and God chose him. So why shouldn't he be able to have everything that he wants? He's done so much for God. David is so blinded by his own dishonesty that he's willing to go to great lengths to continue that self-deception and to not let anybody else know what's been going on. But the second that David hears a similar story, the second that he sees somebody doing exactly what he sees, he goes, whoa, wait a minute, that's not right. Off with their heads, he says. Because it's easy to be honest about other people. Have you ever noticed it's easier to look at other people and go, well, that person, glad I'm not that person, I'm glad I'm not committing that sin, I'm glad I'm not struggling with that particular thing that that person's studying or struggling with. Most of us have no problem looking around us and being totally honest about how we feel about the actions of others. And we can justify why their actions are so much worse than anything that we're doing because we can play those games in our own head. Being honest with ourselves sometimes is really, really tough. So I've been doing an internship for a while, and one of the things that I do is I get to go to the Visalia Rescue Mission. And I get to get some clinical hours there, and I work with the clients at the rescue mission when they first come in. And I get to hear about their struggles, and I get to hear about what it was that brought them to the rescue mission. I've only been doing it for a couple of weeks now, but I got to tell you, the clients that I've met so far are some of the bravest, most authentic, and honest men and women that I've ever met with in my life. Because they've gotten to a point in their lives where they say to themselves, where they decide, I'm just going to be honest about what I'm struggling with. I'm just going to be honest with myself, and then I can be honest with others, and I can go to others and I can say, I need help. Whatever that looks like. That takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of courage for any one of us to go, you know, I'm not okay. And I could probably use some help. That's not an easy thing to do. Now the cynic will say, yeah, those people that come to the rescue mission, they're just looking for a meal and a place to sleep. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay if somebody's looking for a place to lay their head and a place for a hot meal. I'm okay with that. Because one thing I do know is that when they come to the rescue mission, you know what they will hear? They'll hear the name Jesus. And not just used as a swear word, but they'll hear about who Jesus really is. And what he's done for them, and how he can transform their lives. And there are those that are in this program, yes, they will fail at the program. And they will become a slave once again to their addiction. But at least they're trying. They're honest with themselves. I respect that they have enough courage to sit down and share their story with someone in front of them. And that they're being honest with themselves. Again, that's hard. Being honest with ourselves about who we are and what we struggle with and what it is that's going on in our lives, that is a daily, hourly, minute to the second kind of thing. Being honest about where we struggle. Because all of the self-help books and Bible studies and therapy and spiritual directions and prayer circles that everybody does to get connected with God, all of those are good things, but they are even better things when we're honest with ourselves first and foremost. When we have the self-awareness to be able to say, I'm not okay. And I got to tell you, that kind of self-awareness does not start on a therapist's couch or in a pastor's office. It starts the moment we're able to drop down on our knees and talk with our Creator. There's a line from Scripture that every time I hear it, I say to myself, I really need to memorize those lines. And that needs to be a part of my daily prayer. Every time I hear them, and then I forget to write them down, or I get busy. But the words go like this: Search me, O God, and know my heart. Test me and know my thoughts. See if there's any wicked in me, and lead me in the way of the everlasting. I think those are beautiful words. I mean, that's a daily prayer that we could say to start the day and to end the day. And the person who wrote those words must have been somebody of absolute high integrity, somebody who had it all together, somebody who never screwed up, somebody that I could never, ever live up to who would be able to write words like that. But in fact, when you read those words, that comes from a psalm. It comes from the Psalm of David. This great king who made a really bad mistake over and over and over again. Ask God, God, search me, seek me out, tell me, let me know where it is that I need help. David realized that he has weaknesses. He wrote these beautiful Psalms all throughout the Bible, or not throughout the Bible, but all throughout the book of Psalms. So that's my hope for the next few weeks as we walk through our sermon series, is that you and I will be open to honesty at all costs. That we would be willing to be down on our knees in prayer, asking God to search us out and point to those areas in our lives that need attention. Our strugglers, our fears, all of it. And that God would give us the courage not just to be honest with ourselves, but to be honest with the few trusted people in our lives. Those people in our lives that we can reach out to and say, hey, I'm not okay. Things are not going that great. I'm struggling. And not just those things. You don't want to be a downer to your friends, but those friends that you can go to when you have celebrations and say, celebrate this good news with me. Those people that you trust with all of the news, with all of your news, that can pray for you and that you know will be checking in on you. People that you would trust with all your stuff. And if you're married, and you immediately did not think of your spouse as one of those trusted people, it could be something to think about. One of the most difficult things to do is to be honest about ourselves to other people. Yeah, it's hard to be honest about ourselves. It's hard to be honest to ourselves, but it's also hard to be honest about ourselves with others as well, because we don't like vulnerability and weakness. But in order to be honest at all costs, we have to be willing to let God shine His light in some dark places in our lives. One of the best ways to do this is, have you ever heard of the phrase Sunday best? Putting on your Sunday best. I'm just here to tell you that the idea of people putting on their Sunday's best is a myth. I've talked about this before, but when I was growing up in the Lutheran Church, one of the things that drove me absolutely crazy was this idea of cleanliness is close to godliness. Put on your Sunday best. Look good. Be a good family. Do this, do that. I always felt as a kid that people were fake to me. That's just how I viewed people. They put on their best clothes. They talked about their greatest accomplishments. It seems like they always had their stuff together. I was one of those kids. Everything was fine. Everything was great. Every week they would show up and they would talk about what's great in their lives. And it wasn't until I was much older that I realized that what I saw as people putting on their Sunday best a lot of times were people covering up their greatest fears. You have to look good on the outside so that people don't wonder what's going on the inside. And I'm totally guilty of that. I do that more often than I care to admit. Honesty at all costs does not mean honesty to all people. It means those trusted people in your life that you can come to. But first and foremost, as I said, it means getting on your knees and asking God's light to shine in the dark places. To be honest with ourselves about where we're struggling. And to seek out those friends and those brothers and sisters in our lives who can pray for us. Because the fact of the matter is, all of us are broken in one way or another. Some of us are just more broken at this time than others are. And some other people who aren't that broken right now will be later. That's how life is. That's why we have these relationships. That's why God gave us the church to care for one another, so that God could use us to love our brothers and sisters and to pray for them. So, I'd like to end my message this morning with a prayer. Will you please join with me in prayer? Heavenly Father, seek us and know our hearts, and allow us to see what you see. God, help us to be honest, even though sometimes we know it could be painful. But God, we give you thanks that you have placed people in our lives that we can go to, and we can be honest, and we can be vulnerable. And they'll listen to us, and they'll pray for us, and they'll love us for who we are. God, I thank you for your church. We pray all this in your name. Amen. The peace of the Lord be with you always. Please share that peace with everyone.